Last April 2012 album to talk about for 10 years later, and this was one I almost didn't end up making a video on. I didn't initially think I was going to have enough to say about this album based on my opinions on the music, but suddenly I do. So welcome back to 10 Years Later, the series where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later for good or bad reasons. And as you can tell from the title, the album that we'll be talking about today is the 2012 Future record Pluto. Atlanta trap rapper, auto-tune crooner, and apparently monogamous gentleman Future, aka Future Hendrix, released this as his debut studio album back in 2012. These days, whether you enjoy his music or not, we know Future as one of the biggest pioneers of modern hip-hop, especially with his unique use of vocal effects and melodies and potential invention of the mumble rap style. Back in 2012, though, he was one of a long list of noteworthy artists coming out of Atlanta trying to make a name for themselves. After dropping several mixtapes, he put out the tape True Story in 2011, which included the single Tony Montana that would essentially go on to birth mumble rap in and of itself. From there, Future's stock blew up. He collaborated with Gucci Mane, his music was being played by DJ Esco, and he signed with Epic Records in late 2011, while dropping a few more mixtapes before finally giving listeners this record as his first studio album. Now, some of you may know, but I have a bit of a mixed history with Future's music. While I hated his 2019 album, The WIZRD, I honestly loved his 2020 album, High Off Life. I think that in and of itself is a bit of a hot take. That said, he's the type of artist who appears so often as a feature that it's kind of hard for me to keep up with what songs of his I like and dislike. Nevertheless, while my opinions on his music are mixed, I do appreciate that he's had a profound impact on hip-hop, and I think a large chunk of the rap music we've gotten and enjoyed in the last decade might not have existed if not for him. Or if it did, it would exist in a wildly different form. Thus, I wanted to see where it all began with his first album, though Spotify did me no favors. I chose to listen to the standard edition, which is 15 tracks spread across a pretty solid 56 minutes. However, the standard edition that's available on Spotify is only the clean version, which in some cases is barely the clean version because it can never decide what it wants to censor. And the only way to hear the explicit tracks would be to listen to the Pluto 3D re-release, which featured a totally different track list and separate remixes from the original album. I stuck with the standard edition, but I did go back and listen to the explicit versions of quite a few of the songs because boy, did some of them sound extra awkward with swear words removed. Either way, my time with this record was largely forgettable in terms of the music itself, but the album's presence and its existence still felt kind of memorable. And not in that it's so terrible but it doesn't leave my mind kind of way, but rather the I can't get into it but I see how it really changed up hip-hop kind of way. Even though yes, the album lost me more often than it grabbed me. The opener, The Future Is Now, is not much more than a nice dramatic acoustic-led intro from spoken word Great Big Rube that leads into the first real song, Parachute. Now, the last thing I want to listen to at this current point in time is anything involving R. Kelly, but he sounds good even though the hook is the same brand of unstructured awkwardness not uncommon in some early 2010s hip-hop. Future sounds alright and Rico Love's pre-chorus is nice, but the electronic vibe of the instrumental doesn't really grab me, nor does that bar about a girl begging to catch Future's semen. Blah. No one ever said Future was a lyrical mastermind, I suppose. And sadly, a lot of those same lukewarm thoughts can be applied to songs like Straight Up, Astronaut Chick, Never Ever, and Long Live the Pimp, though the latter does feature a pretty sinister verse from Trey the Truth. It feels like Future's style and ideas were more interesting than the songs themselves. Many of them lacked much in the way of catchy hooks, memorable production, or smart lyricism, but what made Future such a unique voice and figure in hip-hop at the time was how he helped bring auto-tune vocals back at a time when it felt like their appeal was damn near killed by Jay-Z less than 3 years earlier. Even with that though, the songs themselves just don't click with me and I don't really remember them as much as I should. And there are a few tracks that sink a bit lower than that for me. Truth Gonna Hurt You takes on a slower, almost sultry kind of feel, but that just makes the song dull out for me a lot faster. Little About It stands out and it almost sounds like Future made the song on rest mode. And Homicide is the kind of song I probably wouldn't care nearly as much about if not for Snoop Dogg's awesome guest verse. He really steals the show and puts together a fantastic performance. Otherwise, it's a song that has some dark production that Future doesn't quite do enough with. Although maybe I'm biased because Future drops a bar where he says that he never liked Nintendo. Like, not Not even Super Mario World? Ocarina of Time? Metroid Prime? Not one? I mean, he did a song for the Deathloop soundtrack. He's gotta have some respect for Nintendo. Okay, jokes aside, the song has decent moments but doesn't grab me all that much like a lot of other tracks on here. Now, I will say there are some cuts I can at least appreciate from afar, even if I don't find myself wanting to re-listen to them. With the Magic remix, I can give credit to T.I. for dropping a decent guest verse and for the song having one of the better hooks on the album, even if the rest of it is as homogenous as all the songs that surround it. I'm Trippin' was leaning dangerously close to being one of my least favorites on the album, but the second verse where Future goes a bit harder with a triplet flow is one of his better moments on the album. I also thought Juicy J had some charisma on his verse, even if the song felt a bit monotonous by the time I got to it. Tony Montana deserves to be talked about as the song that may as well have invented mumble rap. Future recorded the hook while he was so high that he couldn't open his mouth, hence leading to the mumbled sound and the creation of this style. I find the song intriguing for that reason, and I do think the tiptoeing dark pianos are cool, but I'm not sure how to feel about the Drake verse. He sounds fine, yeah, but unlike a lot of other people, I've always kind of felt like Drake and Future haven't meshed as well as a duo, and that makes this song a slightly awkward trade-off in that regard. Once again, I can give a lot of credit to it, especially given its influence on the sound that hip-hop would adopt within the decade, but I can't find myself wanting to loop or return to it all that much. Same thing goes for Turn on the Lights. I see how this established Future's unconventional direction with its mumbly but still emotional sound, but it's got an awkward style to it that I can't see myself really wanting to go back to. As far as proper highlights go, Permanent Scar was a song that grabbed me a lot more than a lot of the others here, mostly for its video game-esque electronic beat and the more dramatic emotional lyricism from Future. It still carries a lot of that electronic style that was seen in a lot of hip-hop in the late 2000s and early 2010s, but I think the darker lyricism makes it a lot easier for me to appreciate. Same Damn Time is also a banger. I honestly enjoy the loud, boastful, banging production as well as the way that Future's performance shows us the two sides of him, the loud, hyped up side and the more low-key auto-tune sound. It definitely carries a lot of the same vibes as other tracks here, but I think Future can carry it a bit more than other tracks because his performance is more interesting, helping it be one of the album's better tracks. Now, if only the explicit version of the non-remixed edition was available on Spotify, so I didn't have to listen to it with the swears edited out. And You Deserve It closes the album with another track that definitely borrows heavily from the sounds of the last few cuts, but it pulls me in a bit more because of Future's more emotional tone as well as the celebratory lyrics. While the writing isn't super deep, I like how Future reflects on his success and the way that he deserves that success. I know the track list is different between this and the Pluto 3D re-release, but I do think it's an appropriate closer to the standard edition of the album. Overall, Future's 2012 debut album occupies this really complex space for me. I can't totally recommend listening to it unless you're a diehard fan, but I feel like I can't ignore the shockwave that the album sent that is still felt to this day. In terms of the actual quality of the album, the production is rather one note and not all that unique. Future himself often can't quite grab me with his vocal sounds, and I think he gets outshined a lot by his features who do a lot of heavy lifting and put up some great performances. Yet despite it not being the most high quality or timeless piece of music I've listened to in this series, it's a record that left a pretty interesting footprint on rap music. While I mentioned that Future's vocal performances didn't grab me, the concept of them had to have been a shock to listeners in 2012, and for better or worse, he essentially invented the mumble rap style and damn near laid a major blueprint for what a lot of future hip-hop would become. To that end, I think the album deserves some kind of recognition even if the music itself doesn't really leave much of a lasting impression. I almost see this record as being comparable to some extent to Drake's So Far Gone mixtape. That project was pretty groundbreaking for hip-hop, but it's the type of record where I appreciate its place in hip-hop more than I enjoy some of the actual music itself. Pluto is similar. Future's influence, of which he has quite a bit, was established with this album and it's worth appreciating in hindsight, but the content of the album itself does frighteningly little for me. If you're a Future diehard, I can see you enjoying this, but otherwise it's the type of album I see as a relic, although one that made a pretty impressive mark and is kind of interesting to ponder more than it is to listen to. Back in 2012, I feel like I probably would have hated this and not understood what it was going for at all. As someone whose gateway into hip-hop was Eminem, I can't imagine 2012 Matt would have done anything other than use this as a part of the all hip-hop that isn't Eminem is total garbage argument. Listening to it now, I see what Future was going for, but I can't say it really grabbed me at all. If I had to put it on my scale, it's really hard. I didn't find it to be excruciatingly bad, but a lot of it just blanked out of my head almost immediately after that first listen. It's hard for me to give it a bad rating though, because I see what Future was going for with it and the effect it would have on the genre. honestly, at this point, my rating scale is more of a label scale anyway, so I can invent any rating I see fit to invent. Thus, I guess I'll give it an indifferent rating. I don't think it's bad, and I see its impact, but I can't say I really like it that much, and I can't say I want to return to it all too much. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it back when it came out in 2012? Do you still listen to it now? Did you love it back then? Hate it back then? Do you still love it now? Do you still hate it now? Are you just completely indifferent toward it? And where do you place it in Future's pantheon of music, of which he has quite a bit? Whatever your thoughts and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And now that I'm done with the April albums, of course, it's time to move on to the May 2012 albums. There's only going to be a couple, but if all goes right, the next 10 Years Later video is going to be on B.O.B's Strange Clouds. As I said, I'm going to try to get those videos out in the month of April as opposed to May, just so I can be ahead of schedule for some of the busier months, and also to make sure I'm not crunching myself too hard between that and my job. So stay tuned for that, but until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.